Well, look, this is getting absolutely outrageous.
That's outrageous.
The flopping, that is, the escalatory nature that is flopping in the NBA, it is an egregious eyesore in the era of repair. I call that the era of repair because we are finally getting away from the guys, the players, and the trends that wrecked the sport for like an entire decade from 2010 to 2020. Now, though, we have this great young crop of stars. We have storylines galore, and everything is matriculating in a positive direction for the NBA these days. But this is still one element. We simply have to get out of the sport. I mean, what in the world happened to the NBA anyway? This was a sport that used to be played by men, back when men were men, that is. And players didn't shy away from contact. In fact, they hunted it. Yes, basketball was never meant to be a combat sport, but it always at its heart was a contact sport. Watching highlights from back in the day, and it doesn't even look like the same sport that we're watching here in a number of different capacities, but primarily in the amount of contact that we see throughout a game and the amount of contact that is deemed to be acceptable throughout games. In virtually every other era we've seen in the past, tough guys were the best players in the sport. Now it seems, though, that the best players are the ones that are going about these flopping tactics. I mean, damn it, people used to play basketball in neck braces back in the day. No, that is not hyperbole. Go check it out. Find the footage. In fact, I'll put some right here of guys in the NBA playing in neck braces. But of course, that all changed, when the LeBron James era ushered in. And he, of course, is the GOAT of flopping. If he is the king of one thing, it is of hunting contact, embellishing contact, flopping and flailing all over the basketball court. But as is the trajectory in sports, well, all things seem to be improving these days. People seem to be getting better and taking things to the next level. And so too are this current crop of players, seemingly taking the torch from LeBron James and improving upon the work that he put down during the decade of the 2010s, to the point where I believe that I might have seen the most egregious flop in NBA history a few nights ago. If you missed it, it's one of the worst flops that you've ever seen, and it was perpetrated by Isaiah Hartenstein, who was one of allegedly like the biggest tough guys in the NBA. His list height and weight is 7 foot, 250 pounds. He is an enforcer and a great player in his own right for the Oklahoma City Thunder, the best team in the NBA, dropping historical net margins of differential at this point. And he is spearheading one of the greatest, if not the single greatest defenses ever. But when they matched up against the Minnesota Timberwolves a few nights ago in NBA Cup action, well, he did this against Rudy Gobert. And you really have to dig into the tape here to completely appreciate and understand what's happening here. First of all, Hartenstein does the full-blown flop to the ground, but he is committed. Look at him once he's on the ground, checking his nose and feeling around, making sure, all of his teeth are there or his face and nose isn't bleeding anywhere. Then when you see him back on the bench in the sideline and they are reviewing it because a flagrant foul was called on this play, by the way, for an unnecessary act by Rudy Gobert. So as the officials are checking the tape to see, if it's going to be a flagrant 1 or flagrant 2, look at Hartenstein's reaction. He's sitting there chuckling while he's drinking his water bottle. And you figure out just why that is when you go back and check the tape. And they did put it up in a myriad of different angles by ESPN while the officials were reviewing. And you can see that Rudy Gobert doesn't even touch Hartenstein at all. No contact whatsoever made. It looked like someone shot him from the stands by his reaction. By the way, he goes down to the ground and is checking his face. Just an absolute breathtaking flop here. One of the absolute worst that I've ever seen in my entire lifetime of watching the NBA. And we have to put an end to this because the NBA is finally, like I said, finally trickling in the proper direction after about 10 to 15 years of darkness thanks to the LeBron James era. But we have to root this out. We have to eradicate it. This should be a 1-game suspension in my estimation. First of all, when the officials went over and reviewed it and we saw the extent of how heinous of a flop this was, Hartenstein should have been assessed a flagrant, not the other way around, or maybe ejected from the game altogether. I don't know exactly what I would suggest, but quite frankly, in reviewing this, when the league office takes a look, after the fact, I personally would push for a 1-game suspension for the perpetrator of such a heinous, reprehensible flop that Isaiah Hartenstein laid down. It's not getting better. That is the one element of the game that seems to not be getting any better or moving in the right direction. As gameplay and game style and the stars that we have are playing the right way, the one thing that we still have, which is egregious, I think, is this flopping. And it's a huge turnoff to fans, I think, and to other players as well in some degree, because not every player is doing it, but far too much of the league is still at this point in time. So we have to work better. The league offices have to intervene. We have to get more strict and impose more stringent fines and different kinds of penalties on these players to continue to deploy this most outrageous act.